Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times Picayune. Perryn Keys here hanging out with you on a Monday, rainy Monday, as we come to you midday Monday, a rainy, cloudy, overcast Monday in Baton Rouge, but just as well that we're getting this kind of weather today than as opposed to Saturday and Sunday, which would have fouled up the weekend over at Alec Box, and what was a crucial weekend. They're all going to be crucial weekends as LSU comes down the stretch. The Tigers take 2 of 3 from Auburn. They are 28-17 overall, 7-14 in the SEC. And as Koki Riley and I will discuss, that is probably the most important number out of all of these that you see in front of you. 11 games left for the Tigers overall, 3 SEC series, and an RPI ranking of 42, which seemingly would have you close to the bubble. But we will discuss a little bit more in detail all the obvious reasons why they've got a lot of work to do as we head down the stretch. Koki, how you doing this Monday?
Doing pretty well. Doesn't seem like Mother Nature was a fan of the LSU loss yesterday, so decided just pour buckets instead. Yeah, all things considered, I'm doing pretty well.
All things considered, the LSU Tigers take 2 of 3 from Auburn. Koki, you and I had discussed several times before the series got underway. 2 of 3 was the minimum, probably, that LSU could afford to handle in this series, going up against Auburn, one of the lesser teams in the SEC, even more so than LSU. And they 2 out of 3 is exactly what they got. But let's talk about Sunday first. Tigers had a chance to complete the sweep. Jay Johnson makes what may or may not. I mean, it's easy to obviously second guess. That's what all managers and coaches have happened to them in baseball, as we know. But he elects not to go with Griffin Herring to start. He goes a different direction. And the LSU Tigers found themselves behind the 8 ball very, very quickly. Let's just discuss this loss, this 7-5 loss to Auburn on Sunday before we get into the rest of the series.
Yeah, it was another sliding doors moment for this LSU team. Sort of wrote about that after the game, and in my sort of series takeaways piece, I should say, and I say that because it was just another winnable game and another game that ended up, sort of helping define what the season has sort of turned into. And that I look back at the Florida loss, the Game 2 Florida loss, the Game 2 Vanderbilt loss. Those are 2 close losses at home that decided whether they would win a series or lose a series against at least a competitive SEC opponent. In Vanderbilt's case, a very good SEC opponent. And, if they win this game, if they win those 2 games, then we're probably not in the spot that we're in right now with this LSU team. They would be at least closer to the NCAA tournament field, if not in it pretty firmly, if it weren't for these 3 or 4 games. And this game was just another example of that. And I think that with that Florida game, with that Vanderbilt game, with a few other games, a lot of that came down to what happened at the end of the game. In this game, this Auburn game was different because it was about what happened at the beginning of the game with Griffin Herring and with Kade Anderson. And I don't fault them at all for not starting Griffin Herring in this game. And one of the reasons
I was about to say, go into detail a little bit more about that, because that's obviously, from the outsider's perspective, you say, well, hey, this guy's doing a great job every chance he's gotten. It only stands to reason he should get a shot to start on Sunday. Go through why you didn't think that was necessarily the wrong move.
Yeah, because he's been your best reliever all season, and you need someone to be a great reliever for you toward the end of games. And for the most part, this season they've been desperate he's been really the only consistent guy from weekend to weekend. And yeah, if he could close out the last 4 or 5 innings of this game, that would have been wonderful for them. But I guess the problem is that you didn't really have anyone to sort of start the game. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Ackenhausen pitched on Saturday, and Jay Johnson wouldn't clarify as to why he pitched on Saturday and didn't start on Sunday. Even after I asked of him about that specifically. The problem for me, at least, was, again, just my personal opinion, is that Kade Anderson threw 62 pitches on Tuesday. And we've already talked with Anderson and with Johnson about how he looks better and pitches better when he has extra rest and he's a little sharper. And yes, Johnson said that he passed all the protocols that would allow him to pitch this weekend, despite pitching on Tuesday. But at the same time, there's a difference between passing the protocols and actually being fresh enough to be at your actual best, right?
To be effective, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, this isn't Major League Baseball and the guys can pitch 3 times in 3 days. Like, this is
right.
I think especially for like a younger developmental guy like Kade, who still needs some work in order to be at his best against SEC competition, he needs that, he needs a week off, right? And he didn't really get that in the Sunday start, and I kind of feel bad for him because of that. And I wrote a lot about sort of the improvements he's made this season, the fact that he's added a slider, and I just feel like they put him in a pretty tough spot. And even with that said, like, I mean, part of it's that decision to start Anderson, but part of it's also kind of bad luck because, I mean, Anderson gave up 1 double in the inning, but I mean, before that, there were just a couple fluke singles and he was an out away from getting through the inning without giving up a run anyway. And I gotta say, like, sometimes the ball just doesn't roll your way, and that's been a very consistent theme for this team this season. And that sounds like I'm making a big excuse for them, but if you just watch the games, and I've watched pretty much all of them, that's just been a consistent theme, really, especially since the start of conference play. Like, they're not getting the rolls, and last year they were getting the rolls, and that sometimes that's just how the sport works, especially when you're only playing a 50 some odd game season. So I mean, I gotta say, like, granted, they probably shouldn't have started Anderson this game. I don't think they should have started Herring either, because you need someone to close out the game, or at least get you through the middle innings if you're losing by a good bit, or and you couldn't really start him at full starter's length, because once Griffin's thrown around 60, 65 pitches, he just hasn't been as effective, and he's been really gassed. And Johnson said that, and I kind of agree with him on that one.
So you say don't start Anderson and don't start Herring. Who would you have started if you were Coach Koki Riley?
I mean, Christian Little pitched in this game, looked really good. Pitched on Friday, was excellent. 2 innings. Retired all 6 batters he faced, and looked as dominant as he has in an LSU uniform up to this point. He's pitching some of his best ball, period. I mean, you could even go with a true opener, Gavin Guidry.
I was going to say, use him as an opener. Yeah, sure.
For example, and Little has starting experience, so you again, like I said, you could toss him out there. Like, the back end of the bullpen pitched really well for them this weekend. Like, Sam Dutton had an inning this weekend and threw well. On Sunday, I should say, specifically with Sunday. And then, as did Justin Laurie, threw a scoreless inning as well. So I mean, all of those options to me would have made more sense, because those guys are fresher. Those guys probably have more experience against SEC competition. And I think the freshness part is the part that I just can't totally wrap my head around with starting Anderson in this game. And I do understand, like, the idea of starting Anderson. Like, if Anderson was fresh, I probably would have started him, because, again, he's the most similar guy to Gage Jump. And Johnson said this specifically. He's the most similar guy to Gage Jump in terms of delivery and stuff in their bullpen. And that's true, especially since Anderson's added the slider. So, and as we saw with Jump on Friday, like, that stuff works against this Auburn team, and lefties work against this Auburn team.
Right.
It's just, I just don't think Anderson was in the right spot, physically, to totally live up to that. And that's the part that, again, I can't quite get over the hump with, I guess.
Well, let's talk about the bull. You bring up the bullpen. Let's talk about the bullpen and some of the good things that did happen this weekend. And I would have to say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would have to say certainly that this looks like, not against the most potent lineup against Auburn, but nonetheless, you had some performances from some relievers who, frankly, had struggled, or we'd not seen nearly as much of compared to earlier in the season. Gavin Guidry is one that sort of seemingly had fallen out of favor. Christian Little, as you said, 3 2/3 scoreless innings. in 2 games. Will Helmers comes in, of course. Griffin Herring, Sam Dutton, Justin Lohr. This is sort of a bounce back performance from a bullpen that had, again, Koki, you've seen these guys almost from start to finish, almost every single game. So you don't need me to tell you that they have struggled with consistency. And this was not a case where they had this weekend. They really did their job.
Yeah, 1.42 ERA on the weekend, 2 walks as an entire bullpen staff, 1 intentional. So technically 3.
That doesn't get any better than that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and they were pounding the strike zone. They showed good stuff. They had real good conviction with their stuff, especially a guy like Christian Little. I think he ran his fastball up to 96.5 miles an hour or something like that at one point over the weekend. They didn't have to use their bullpen a ton in the first 2 games, but in Sunday that's where it really shone through. I mean, only 2 earned runs in 8 1/3 innings. When you get that sort of stat line for a bullpen when they have to throw 8 1/3 innings, you can't ask for anything more than that.
And it does bode well. You're going to have to assume that let's play this thing out. Let's just say that whether it's the next 11 games and or if they do what they need to do, and we'll talk about that in terms of getting into the SEC tournament, making sure you have a spot at the tournament, and or also getting to the type of SEC record that LSU needs to get itself to. You're probably going to have a lot of games between now and then, and in Hoover, if you make it there, where you're going to have that kind of performance. The pitching staff is either worn out or a starter's ineffective, and you're going to have to sort of piecemeal this thing together with a bullpen game. And so you have to have these guys do what they're supposed to do down the stretch.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're going to have to ask guys more than what they've been asked to do throughout the season. So for example, like with this Anderson situation, yeah, I threw 62 innings on Tuesday, but we're in Hoover now and we need you again,
That's right. That's exactly it.
Like pushing a guy like that to the limit in Hoover when you absolutely need those wins. Like I understand that and you're kind of desperate for answers. I don't think they're quite at that point yet because again, they're still in the regular season and Anderson's a freshman, but let's try not to harp on that point too much more. But yeah, exactly like you said, you need to sort of showcase that depth as the season goes along. And when you're in these sort of tournament like scenarios, whether it's the NCAA tournament, the SEC tournament, the regional, especially Omaha, you need to sort of push guys, further along and throw them longer, throw them on shorter rest. And we saw that a lot last year in Omaha. So I don't think LSU fans are, unfamiliar with this at all. But, this is just the reality of postseason baseball. And I think using the regular season as obviously you have to win games in the regular season even to make these sort of tournaments. But at the same time, you need to make sure your guys are rested enough heading into the postseason when you have to ask them to do more. So, and I want to mention that because the team 2 years ago had to go to its bullpen so often and so early in games that by the time they got to the NCAA tournament, they were just pooped. And guys were just a lot more ineffective than they were during the regular season. There's a lot of that was because they were asked to do too much during the regular season because, again, they didn't have the starting pitching that season. So, and last year that obviously wasn't the case. So I think just keep an eye on how they use these guys moving forward. And I think if they improve as the year goes along, that's going to bode better for them in the SEC tourney when, it's going to be do or die for them almost every single game.
Well, speaking of clutch performances, we discussed this last week on the podcast, but Ashton Larson did it again. He's had another nice weekend against Auburn, a freshman who really came in and played a key role when LSU needed for him to come in and play a key role. He's 6 for 13 at the plate this weekend and just keeps on rolling. He looks like somebody who's going to do quite a lot of damage over the course of his LSU career, however long that lasts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, you got to love his approach at the plate. He never, gets out of himself, even when he takes
not a sloppy at bat. Yeah.
Even when he takes a bad swing, he's not going to, compound that error ever. And I think mechanically he's incredibly sound. There's not a big leg kick. There's not a lot going on with his hands at the top. It's point A to point B. If you can see that in the video, it's point A to point B, and it's just a very sweet swing. And I don't know, he just does a really good job of compartmentalizing things and staying focused on the task at hand. And I know it sounds like very boring analysis, but when you see how good of a job he does at simplifying everything, whether it's mentally or mechanically, you can sort of understand how this freshman can, play this well this season, despite the fact that, heading into the year, he was, like a strong reserve outfielder. So
It's, to me, the mental part is what's most impressive, because then that also leads to no breakdowns in your technical swing or your performance out there in the outfield. And for you to be doing that at, what is he, 17, 18 years old, must be 18 years old, maybe 19 at this point. It's one thing to have that mental approach. It's another thing to do it when you're a freshman who wasn't originally supposed to be counted on as being an everyday player. And now you're going out and doing it and continuing to do it at a consistent level. Even as you get deep into the season, stakes go up, pressure goes up, and all those types of things.
He's a big fan of, maybe this is part of his secret to success. He's a big fan of Izzo's Legal Burrito, the burrito shop.
I can dig it.
Yeah, and the only reason why I know this is because I think before the press conference on Thursday, I just wanted to stop in and get something quick to eat, and guess who I run into in line? Ashton Larson.
None other than
Ashton Larson.
That's good. Hey, look, if that's part of his routine, he needs to make sure that he keeps it going. And if there is one in Hoover, or for that matter in College Station, here this weekend, they need to scope it out and find out where it is and make sure he gets his
plenty of calories and plenty of protein there. And I asked him if he goes often. He says yes. And then a teammate confirmed that during the press conference. So, just a little insight for those listening to the pod.
The word has it that baseball players tend to be quite superstitious. That's the rumor going around. That's been the rumor going around for 200 years now, and it seems to be true, especially when you're talking about position players and batters. So anyhow, let's talk about center field. Paxton Kling leads off and starts in center. That changes though on Sunday, and Gage Johnson puts in Mac Bingham. Mac Bingham, of course, has struggled at times this year. And he kind of did again. First two games of the series, Kling went 0 for 6. Bingham goes 0 for 4. That's a tough position in the lineup at center field to not be getting anything out of in terms of offensive production. What do you do there moving forward at center field?
To get a goose egg from your leadoff spot over a weekend, 0 for 10 combined.
Not great. Not great.
That's really tough.
And incidentally, to win 2 out of 3 games in doing so, that's tough to do as well. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. And then a lot of that has to do with the fact that the bottom half of the order was actually pretty good this weekend. Like Stephen Milam hit a 3-run home run from the right side, which is not his natural side as a hitter. That was impressive. And he hit it to one of the deeper parts of the park. But anyway, with the center field leadoff situation, I guess we can kind of combine those two things together. I mean, they do have an extra solution there in Jake Brown, a guy who I think he's only started one SEC game. He's played in a few others, but he's a really good athlete. He can obviously play a really well defensively in center field at the very least, and then offensively he provides a little bit of pop. He's a good quick twitch athlete, and maybe he's an option that they can go to there to give him a little bit of an offensive spark at the very least. But Kling is a really excellent defensive center fielder and probably one of the better defensive center fielders in the entire conference. But with the way he's performing at the plate, it's just hard to play him every single day. And Gage Johnson's been very patient with him this season. He's given him plenty of opportunities to sort of like get himself out of this sort of rut, but it just hasn't really materialized. And with Bingham, it seemed like he just had a consistent everyday spot in left field, or if Kling was struggling in center field, and then he just basically hit a rut as well. And then over the Missouri series, he stopped playing as often, sort of lost that everyday spot. Like you said, he gained back a starting spot in the lineup on Sunday. Didn't really take advantage of it. And I think Josh Pearson's hitting well enough now to say that he's back to being an everyday player. And now, obviously, you have Ashton Larson in right field, and he's definitely going to be playing every single day. He's one of your best hitters at the moment. So when you have those two guys with sort of starting spots entrenched, you have, one last rotating spot. And that's been one of the few consistent things since the very, very beginning of the season, right? We've talked about who's going to be the third outfielder, and and the names have just continuously changed throughout the season, right? But now we have an idea, I guess, but right now, I just say that, it looks like it's Mac Bingham, it looks like it's Paxton Kling, it looks like it's maybe Jake Brown as guys who are sort of fighting over that last spot. Because remember, at the very beginning of the year, it was Jake Brown, Ethan Fry, and Ashton Larson for one of the corner spots, cornering out probably right field, with Josh Pearson playing second base. Now, again, that's all sort of changed with you add Stephen Milam into that mix, and it's been. I don't want to say it's been like a good interesting to watch, but it's just been interesting to sort of see how that's all evolved throughout the season, if that makes sense.
Changes, not surprising, as we discussed, actually at the beginning of this season. As anybody who's a baseball fan understands that so much of this changes over the course of the season. Your opening day lineup is never going to be the same as the lineup that you have at the end of the year. By the same token, some of this stuff is, well, how do you account for some of these? And I'm not asking you to provide an answer, Koki. I don't know that there is an answer from a technical standpoint. Mac Bingham last year at Arizona, he's hitting 340. And now he comes to LSU. You assume he's going to take over one of those spots, and he's hitting 270. I don't know what you make out of that. Paxton Kling, they obviously thought, Mr. Pennsylvania, Mr. Baseball in the state of Pennsylvania 2 years ago, and everybody thought that that he would have something like this, in terms of a starting position solidified by now, and it just hasn't quite happened. So I don't know. Sometimes maybe it is just bad luck, and in many cases, in many what am I trying to say? I'm sorry, I'm tripping over my words. Perform, Perryn. Just as it is that maybe the opposing team finds a seeing eye single and a bloop single a little bit more often than the numbers would suggest. Sometimes it really is as simple as, you hit a rocket straight to the third baseman. And it's just not. Now, that doesn't account for a 70-point difference in your batting average. But, what do you just sometimes you just sort of have to throw up your hands and say, well, I don't know why this is not working, but, looking at this on paper, it should have been a whole lot more successful than it was, or than it has been going into the season. So I don't know what you make out of that, but there you have it. So
yeah. And with Mac Bingham, it's been surprising how little, I guess, consistent, solid contact that he has.
Right.
He has an incredibly pull side approach, and it just seems like he's unable to, sort of get to that with any sort of consistency. I mean, there was one point in the first half of SEC play where it seemed like he was, hitting his stride with that a little bit. And he had a 2 home run game against Arkansas, for example, but it's really kind of gone just downhill since then. And with Paxton, Paxton played, everyone, if you're a baseball fan, you know who Jackson Holiday is. Paxton Kling played with Jackson Holiday in the youth circuit. Jay Johnson, on my point,
he's no slouch. He came with all the accolades.
Exactly. He played in Pennsylvania, and that was a big jump for him. But with some of these but if you're that good in your state, and the same can be said for Stephen Milam, it doesn't matter what state you're from. If you're that good and you're playing on these national circuits and you're playing with these top players from Florida and Texas, and you're hanging with them at the very least, then you're going to be considered to be as a guy who can perform at least at the Division I level, if not be, a high draft pick in the MLB draft. I say that because I don't love the whole, Pennsylvania, reason of it all. Right.
Oh, no, I don't buy that for a moment. If you're Mr. Baseball in the state of Pennsylvania, you're plenty good enough
to play at
plenty
LSU,
good
to
enough to
play in the
play in
SEC.
the SEC.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
And
Pennsylvania is not a backwater state. Okay, there's lots of
exactly.
people playing good
Yeah,
baseball up there.
in the state thing again, like the youth circuits, whether it's national team events or all that stuff is so nationalized at this point that
That's right.
it's opened up the opportunity for these other people in other states. Like this is a different sport, but for example, in basketball, in the class of 2025, the best players from Maine, Cooper Flag.
Yeah, that's right.
Like that's unheard of, granted, because no one from Maine ends up becoming that good, but he's that good. And
And you know it because just as you said, the summer circuit, AAU ball, and
exactly.
things of that nature. He's not playing against a bunch of schmoes.
Yeah, he's
He's done it against great competition. So
exactly, whether it's in
so
practices with U.S. teams or playing internationally or any of that stuff. So I don't know. I do think just the Pennsylvania of it all for Paxton specifically, or is really kind of over. I think it's over an overused point, I should say.
there's no reason to assume that because somebody's from Pennsylvania that they're not up to snuff. There've been plenty of people coming, from every single state in the union essentially who have played big, huge roles at LSU. No, Pennsylvania, as I said, Pennsylvania's not a backwater state. He's plenty good enough to get the job done, and he showed it at a high level as a teenager. This is the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at theadvocate.com, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all our writers' great work. Koki's been taking care of you guys all throughout baseball season, so take care of him and subscribe to The Advocate. Whether that's in print or digital, please go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And stay up to date with everything with our LSU newsletter. You would have gotten that Monday morning, and it would have been the featured link would have been Koki's 5 takeaways from this weekend, LSU versus Auburn. And of course, we will have plenty more coming down the line, which we will talk about here in a moment with Texas A&M. So sign up for the LSU newsletter. Plenty to keep your arms around. You never know what's going to happen next at LSU, of course. And so that's the best way to stay up to date with everything. All the headlines delivered straight to your inbox in one place. So sign up at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday on the LSU Sports Insider on all our social channels, but specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. If you go to YouTube and search LSU Tigers on NOLA.com, you should be able to find it, should be able to subscribe, and that way you stay up to date. You never miss an episode, and you can catch us live every Monday and Thursday on the LSU Sports Insider. If you don't catch us live, of course, you can catch us after the fact at any time on that same YouTube channel. And if you get your podcasts in a more traditional way, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. Just search for LSU Sports Insider, and you should be able to call it up. So let's talk, Koki. Let's talk a little bit about where these guys stand. We'll get into Texas A&M here in a moment, and Grambling to a lesser degree. But we discussed it at the top of the show. LSU's 28-17 overall, 42 RPI ranking. That took a tumble 6 spots, probably if for no other reason than Auburn is not the strongest of teams. And so you're going to take a little bit of a hit there in terms of level of competition, and you'll probably take another hit going against Grambling. Although Grambling is having a nice year in the SWAC, I believe there's something like 15-6. You check that right quick. Grambling is 15-6 in conference play, 18-22 overall. Nonetheless, your RPI is not going to be, in all likelihood, what makes or breaks your ability to get into the NCAA tournament. It's going to be more about conference record. I think we've seen this over and over, particularly with SEC and some of the power conferences. And LSU is 7-14 right now, which, of course, means they've got a lot of work to do, as we've discussed many times, as most fans have been discussing. The absolute lowest, and Koki, I think you would agree with this. You said this before the mics got hot, so to speak. The absolute worst they can do and still give themselves a shot is to finish 13-17 in SEC play. If they're going to do that, that means they've got to go 6-3 over the final 9 games against the SEC. They've got 3 series left, starting with Texas A&M, incidentally, one of the best teams in the country so far. But they've got to go 6-3, or really, if they went 7-2, that would put them at 14-16, and they'll have a great shot but 13 and 17 is about the least you can do. And then you got to get yourself into Hoover and probably make a little noise. And by make a little noise, I mean, at the very least, win a couple games. You can't just quietly bow out of Hoover in the SEC tournament. So, long story short, where do these guys stand? What do they have to do? And let's talk a little bit about the tall order they find themselves in because they didn't sweep Auburn. Now you got to go to College Station against, again, one of the better teams in the nation to this point, and maybe have to pull a rabbit out of your hat. You win one, that's fantastic. If you win two, all of a sudden you feel really, really, really good about your lot in life. And excuse me, they're not going to College Station. This is an Alec Box, but nonetheless, it's the number one team in the nation coming in for 3 games at Alec Box. And so, take us through it. What are they going to have to do these final 11 games of the season?
Yeah. Perryn, I think he did a really good job of laying out there. They have to win, 6 of their last 9 SEC games. And that will, and I think the most, I guess, quote unquote realistic path to doing that is winning 1 game this upcoming weekend against Texas A&M, at least, winning at Alabama 2 out of 3, and then sweeping Ole Miss.
You finish at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is not having a great year, but yes, go ahead.
But Ole Miss is also kind of in the same spot that they are in, and that it's not impossible if they make a run that they can make the tournament. So you can't. But they're going to, and I say that because they're going to be playing for something. Like, it's not like
that's right.
Season's totally over. This isn't Auburn.
Right. This isn't Missouri. Yeah.
Yeah. But when I say that though, it's going to be very hard to do that because again, this is a team that couldn't quite sweep Missouri and Auburn, even if they had every chance to do so. This is a team that hadn't won an SEC series before that. I'm not saying any of this is impossible, but I'm just saying how difficult this road is. And and because of how difficult this road is, it makes what happened on Sunday that much more important. Because if they win on Sunday, then they just have to win 5 of these last 9 games, and then 6 would have been great. And again, like, if they heck, I can go back to even the Missouri series where if they sweep those 2 series, they're all of a sudden they're 9-12 in conference play, and they might have a little bit of wiggle room even. And right now they don't have any wiggle room really. If you call 3 losses wiggle room, then that's not a lot of wiggle room. So I need to stop saying that word. It's very hard to say.
Understood.
But yeah, I mean, again, number 1 team in the country, that could be a really helpful resume booster if you win, 2 or 3 of those games. But is it like realistic to expect them to win 2 or 3 of these games? No, it isn't. I'm sorry. It just isn't.
That's right.
Just the way this team has played this season. The Alabama series, that's going to be tough. Like, Alabama is a ranked team, and that is on the road. Granted, you're not playing at Arkansas necessarily, so it's not like the environment's going to like totally demonize you there. That's probably the best way to put it. But it's going to be hard. And then you're going to be playing an Ole Miss team at home. And Ole Miss they're definitely going to be trying, like I said earlier. So we haven't even got to the SEC tournament yet, and who knows who you're going to play, when you're going to play them. And either way, it's probably going to be a team that's going to be in the NCAA tournament or has their ticket punched anyway. So yeah, I mean, this is just not going to be easy for them really at all. And I do think what these last 2 weekends have done for them is they've probably guaranteed them a spot in the NCAA tournament. It's going to be hard for me to see them miss it. Not the NCAA tournament, the SEC tournament. It's going to be hard for me to see them miss it completely at this point because they passed Missouri this weekend. It's going to be hard for Missouri to win too many more games moving forward. Same goes with Auburn. And have those 2 teams win enough games to actually pass LSU in the standings. So I think LSU's spot in the SEC tournament is more or less safe at the moment, even if it's not guaranteed. But at the same time, like LSU is not the sort of program
you can't take anything for granted right now. If you're LSU, you've not earned that right. Yeah. Yes,
exactly.
LSU.
Yeah,
go ahead.
But Yeah, that's pretty much what I got.
LSU playing Texas A&M this weekend. Texas A&M is number 1 in the nation, number 1 RPI rating. After that, they go to Alabama, as you mentioned, Koki. That's not going to be an easy series. To wit, Alabama is number 14 RPI in the nation right now. And then Ole Miss, as you mentioned, Ole Miss is in a similar position. But the fact of the matter is, Ole Miss has a number 27 RPI rating. And of course, for context, LSU is at number 42. So you're looking at uphill climbs no matter what you do, no matter how you do it. And you're also looking at a situation where LSU has to win 6 of their final 9 to give themselves even any sort of realistic shot to make it in. So let's talk about this weekend and Texas A&M here very briefly. Koki, you obviously been paying attention to SEC baseball and LSU start to finish. A&M was expected to have a good team. I don't know that we thought they were going to be this good. Just give us some of the sort of the Reader's Digest version of why these guys have been so good and what LSU is going to have to do to get the job done here.
Well, offensively, they're kind of incredible. I mean, Jace Laviolette, Braden Montgomery, he's the transfer from Stanford, two-way superstar. Not really much on the pitching side, but offensively, I mean, this team just mashes home runs and they mash the ball no matter who's throwing or no matter where, who, when, where, or what. And I would expect them to do the same this upcoming weekend at Alex Box Stadium because they've been doing that against everybody else. And for example, like in this Georgia series this past weekend, I think they fell down 9-0 in game 2, and then they won the game 19-9.
Just keep pounding. Yeah.
It's kind of eerily similar to what this LSU team looked like last season, at least at the plate. Right. And pitching wise, they've been a lot better than I think a lot of people expect them to be. Just they had potential options there, but not a lot of established starters, established SEC guys, and a lot of those guys have sort of lifted themselves up into becoming really good pitchers for them. So I think the pitching aspect of their team, it isn't the strength of their team necessarily. It's still the bats, but it's going to be an uphill battle this weekend. That's for sure. And if they can take a game, that's great. But if they get swept, though, I don't think anybody should be surprised because this Texas A&M team is just they're mean and nasty and they're good.
Does that put that much more? Texas A&M 16th in the nation, 315 at team batting average, 5th in the nation in on base percentage, 438, 4th in the nation in slugging percentage, 594. Does that then put that much more pressure on? And listen, he is, and we haven't talked about him here on this podcast, but we probably should because he's been so good. Does that put that much more pressure on Gage Jump to do exactly what he has done for much of the season, which is to be lights out on Friday night to give you the best shot at claiming at least one game, and that first game being the most important and the most maybe plausible for them to win in terms of, pure matchups. He's obviously LSU's best pitcher. It has been LSU's best starting pitcher. And is going to have to hold those guys at bay.
Yeah, I mean, Gage Jump, the way he's thrown the last 2 weekends, 14 straight scoreless innings has really sort of closed the gap between him and Luke Holman as to who is the best starting pitcher on this team. Jump has always probably had the best stuff between those two. But Holman was just a lot more, consistent and had more experience against these sort of hitters. But with the way Jump has pitched lately, he's almost like without trying has sort of earned that Friday role because the reason why they had him in that Friday role was to give Luke Holman extra rest.
Right.
And I think that was heading into the Tennessee weekend, and it did work because Holman pitched very well against Tennessee. So you have those two guys at the top of the rotation, and that should help quell their bats for the first 4 or 5 innings. Maybe you can hold them to 3-4 runs, on Friday and Saturday, and then hope the bullpen can at least keep you in the game in the second half of the game, and you hope offensively you can jump on A&M starters. I think LSU having Nate Yeske, LSU having Isaac Trujillo, the athletic trainer, and Nate McMillan, the strength coach, like guys who understand who they're facing because they were all at Texas A&M just
That's
last
right.
season.
Yep.
Maybe that can help out, the hitters a little bit and even the pitching staff a little bit as well. So yeah, no, it's going to be really interesting to see how this weekend shakes out in terms of that whole dynamic as well.
Anything else you want to add in terms of just where we see this going, and what you expect to see this weekend? Well, Tuesday, in addition to Tuesday's game against Grambling, but also this weekend is going to be. I think it would be easy to say the biggest weekend at Alec Box so far this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. I think Nate Ackenhausen's health status is going to be pretty huge heading in this weekend. He suffered a hamstring injury on Saturday during his relief appearance. It looked like it was more serious than that. There were suggestions that, maybe it's an arm injury, but he kept on throwing warm-up pitches after he asked for the trainer to come out. So it probably wasn't an arm injury if he's still throwing warm-up pitches.
Right.
And Jay Johnson confirmed that after the game. So it was a hamstring injury. Said he probably could have stayed in the game, but he didn't like the way he was coming down on the mound when he was throwing. So he kind of took himself out as I wouldn't say it was a precautionary measure because something is wrong, but it doesn't sound like it's terribly serious. And I'm kind of curious to see how he sort of progresses as the week goes by and what his status is for this weekend, because that's huge, right? I mean,
Yep.
He has sort of become, the fourth reliable pitcher to go along with the trio of Luke Holman, Gage Jump, and Griffin Herring, right? And granted, the back end of the bullpen did a much better job, and so the supporting pieces with the bullpen did a much better job this week against Auburn. But Auburn's no Texas A&M,
That's
so
right.
I don't
That's
think
right.
it's like we were very positive about the way the bullpen pitched this weekend, and I think LSU fans should be, but at the same time, like, they're about to play the best team they've probably played this entire season. And it's no guarantee that's going to, that 1.4 ERA is going to extend to the next weekend. Heck, if it does extend to the next weekend, then
you're doing great. You put yourself in a great spot.
So yeah, like I think, Nate's injury status is going to be huge for them because they're going to need all the arms they can get. I think that's the best way to put it.
LSU and Texas A. Well, before we get to that, LSU and Grambling, 6:30 p.m. Tuesday at Alec Box. That will be their second to last, if I'm not mistaken, their second to last midweek game of the season. They'll play Northwestern State next week, and then that'll do it for midweek games. But then this weekend, of course, it should be rocking. LSU is going to need that advantage at Alec Box Stadium. 7:00 Friday against Texas A&M, again the number one team in the nation. 6:30 p.m. Saturday against Texas A&M, of course, and 1:00 on Sunday to close it out. The Friday night game will be on the SEC Network. Of course, Koki will be there for it all. We will be there for it all. We're coming down the stretch. As we said before, Skip Bertman used to say that after tax day, that is when LSU baseball takes center stage. And of course, now everybody's sort of coming around and taking a look.
One thing, Perryn,
yep.
I just remember this. Sorry,
no, it's all right.
Jumping in here, but we should probably talk about our friend Corey, who got hit in the head with a baseball.
Yes,
during last Tuesday's game, and then it was a heck of an incident in the fact that first of all, you want to make sure the guy is okay. And Corey,
scary. Yeah.
It was scary for a second there, but the way he played it off in the interview that he had after the game, it kind of became a rallying cry for this team for a couple of days. And it was just like a fun and light moment in a season that hasn't been filled with a lot of fun, light moments. And it was fun getting to talk to him. And there's a story up on the Advocate right now that I did, sort of half profiling him and half sort of going over the situation and everything that's happened since then, whether it's him taking a picture with Warren Morris. Actually, Warren Morris asked to take a picture with him, talking with Tommy White afterwards, getting a free glove from Marucci, showing up with custom shirts, showing up with a hard hat in the outfield, which is really funny.
I got to say, I really dug the shirt. I got hit by a tank and survived, or whatever exactly it says, something to that effect.
And then he came with another shirt the next day. The whole situation has just been like really fun, really lighthearted, and Yeah, and it gave them some good luck for a bit there until Sunday. So yeah, it's yeah. I mean, it was again, it was just a really nice story in a season that hasn't had as many nice stories as I think a lot of LSU fans would like.
Very good. We will see if he's going to be there with maybe full hazmat gear and a hard hat and everything else to be knight in shining armor, bulletproof vest, whatever else he's got in his closet he can bust out, and maybe that'll help LSU bust out in addition. So we will keep an eye on that. Just as I said, 7 o'clock on Friday against Texas A&M, 6:30 against Texas A&M, 6:30 Saturday, excuse me. And they'll finish up at 1 o'clock. Finish up at 1 o'clock on Sunday against Texas A&M, and what's going to be a huge weekend at Alex Box. Certainly should be the biggest weekend to this point at Alex Box this season, and LSU can use all the help they can get. So we will see how that goes, and Koki will be there for everything. As he has been all season. And so, as we say, please support your local journalists. Subscribe to The Advocate. And get all the latest on LSU. Nobody covers LSU like The Advocate does and always has. So subscribe. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And while you're there, go ahead and subscribe to our LSU newsletter. That way you get all the headlines delivered straight to your inbox. You don't have to go searching all over the internet for the latest news. And so to do that, to sign up, you can go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter to sign up for our LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday on the LSU Sports Insider. Excuse me. We are here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically the YouTube channel LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. If you search LSU Tigers on NOLA.com on YouTube, you should be able to find our channel. Hit the subscribe button, and that way you will be able to stay up to date with all of our shows. You can catch us live on all of our shows Mondays and Thursdays. If you don't catch us live, you can still catch us later on that same YouTube channel. And please, if you would, if you are not inclined to check us out on YouTube, you can check us out a little bit more traditional way with our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. Just search for LSU Sports Insider. Koki, it's been a pleasure. You got some good weather at the box this weekend. Hopefully you'll have some more good weather coming up later on Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Cross our fingers about that Tuesday game because the forecast does not look great, but we'll see.
Oh, really?
As we know this, it's something like 80%. But as we know, this is Louisiana. And as the saying goes, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes and we'll see what happens. So, Koki, it's been a pleasure. We appreciate you hanging out with us for a good, strong 45 minutes. And we appreciate everybody else tuning in and listening on the LSU Sports Insider. For Koki Riley, I am Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.